The storm that night wasn't just cold, it was deadly. Snow slammed against the mountains like a white wall, and 76-year-old Henry Carter sat alone in his cabin, listening to the wind tear through the trees. But then he heard something else. A sound too soft to be the storm. A whimper. A cry. When he opened his cabin door, his heart nearly stopped. 2 German Shepherd police pups sat shivering on his porch, covered in frost, their paws raw from the cold. They looked up at him with desperate eyes, begging for help. Without hesitation, Henry wrapped them in blankets and brought them inside. He fed them, warmed them, stayed awake all night caring for their fragile bodies. But at sunrise, before Henry even poured his first cup of tea, he heard engines. He looked outside and froze. A full police unit surrounded his house, and the officers weren't there to thank him. And what they told Henry next would change everything. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The wind howled like a living creature, slamming against the walls of Henry Carter's lonely log cabin. At 76, Henry had survived many winters in the mountains, but this blizzard felt different, angrier, heavier, determined to swallow everything in its path. Snow piled against the windows, and the power flickered every few minutes, filling the cabin with uneasy silence. Henry wrapped his old wool sweater tighter around his shoulders as he shuffled toward the fireplace to adjust the logs. That's when he heard it. A cry, faint, sharp, desperate. Henry froze. No animal should have been out in this storm. The sound came again, carried by the wind like a plea for help. He grabbed his lantern and opened the cabin door. A blast of icy air hit him, stealing his breath. But what he saw on the porch nearly stopped his heart. 2 tiny German Shepherd pups sat huddled together, shaking violently, covered in frost. Their fur was soaked with melting snow, their paws raw from the cold. They lifted their heads weakly, eyes glassy and pleading. "Oh, dear Lord." Henry whispered. Without hesitation, he scooped the freezing pups into his arms and rushed them inside. He wrapped them in blankets, placed them by the fire, and gently rubbed their trembling bodies. As the warmth returned, the pups pressed themselves against him, as if they finally felt safe. By dawn, the blizzard had softened into a quiet snowfall, and Henry finally allowed himself to drift off in his rocking chair. The pups, now warm, fed, and nestled under a thick wool blanket, slept peacefully at his feet. When the morning light crept through the frosted windows, Henry stretched and leaned down to check on them. Their eyes opened instantly, filled with trust that hadn't been there the night before. One licked his hand, the other nuzzled his knee. Henry chuckled softly. "Well now, aren't you two full of life today?" He shuffled to the kitchen to make tea, but before the kettle could whistle, a deep rumble shook the walls. The sound was low at first, then grew louder. Engines, several. Henry frowned and moved toward the window. When he pulled back the curtain, his jaw dropped. Police SUVs, patrol cars, a K9 unit van, all surrounding his cabin. Officers stepped out, hands on belts, eyes stern. Good heavens! What on earth? Henry whispered. The pups sensed the tension and scrambled behind him, tails tucked, ears flattened. A loud knock pounded on his door. Henry opened it slowly. heart thumping. The police chief stood there, snow on his shoulders, voice sharp with urgency. "Sir, step aside. Those 2 dogs behind you, they're missing K9 units." Henry felt the world tilt. K9 units? These pups? Henry blinked in confusion, gripping the doorframe for balance. These little ones? K9 units? That can't be right, he stuttered. But the chief stepped inside without waiting for permission, his boots leaving wet tracks across the wooden floor. Officers followed, scanning the room with flashlights as if searching for hidden threats. One of the pups whimpered and pressed itself against Henry's leg. The other let out a soft growl, standing just ahead of its sibling, trying to be brave. The chief knelt and studied them closely. "They're the missing trainees from yesterday's raid," he said. "They vanished during the operation. Evidence suggested someone took them." Henry shook his head firmly. "I found them freezing on my porch, nearly dead. I didn't steal anything." Before he could say more, an officer called out from behind the cabin. "Chief, you need to see this." Everyone rushed outside. In the snow behind Henry's home were footprints, large, adult-sized, leading from the woods straight to Henry's porch. No paw prints. No wandering animal tracks. "These pups didn't wander here," the officer said quietly. "They were carried." Henry looked down at the trembling puppies and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Someone wanted these K9 pups. And the reason had nothing to do with loyalty. Snow crunched under the officers' boots as they followed the footprints around the cabin. Henry hugged his coat tighter, the pups pressed against his ankles for warmth and safety. The chief crouched near the fence line, brushing snow away to reveal broken wood. "Someone tore this open," he muttered. "They didn't want to be seen entering the property." A K9 officer released his trained dog to inspect the perimeter. The shepherd sniffed the snow, tail stiff, and let out a sharp bark, alerting them to something deeper in the woods. Henry swallowed hard. I did hear something a few nights ago. Thought it was just the wind." The chief's expression darkened. "We think these pups were being targeted. They're part of our elite K9 training program. Whoever took them knew their value." Another officer jogged up, holding a small evidence bag. Inside was a metal clasp, the kind used on police dog tags. "Found this near the fence," he said. Henry's heart tightened. "They were trying to get away, weren't they?" The pups huddled closer, trembling not from cold, but from memory. The chief stood, his tone softer. "For now, they stay inside with you. They feel safe here. And until we catch whoever's after them, we're not taking any chances." That night, the police set up a quiet perimeter around Henry's cabin. Flashlights flickered between the trees, radios whispered, and the cold wind scraped against the windows like restless fingers. Inside, Henry sat by the fire with the pups curled tightly against him. Every time the wind howled, they flinched. Their little bodies remembered fear far too well. Close to midnight, one of the pups suddenly lifted its head, ears stiff, eyes locked on the back door. The other followed, letting out a low, trembling growl. Henry leaned forward. "What is it, little ones?" Before he could stand, a radio crackled outside. Movement. South side of the cabin. Police rushed into position. Between the trees, a dark figure emerged, slow, cautious, scanning the yard. When the intruder stepped into the moonlight, Henry's blood ran cold. It wasn't just a stranger. It was a man wearing tactical gloves, carrying a tranquilizer gun, hands up. Officers shouted, surrounding him. The man bolted, but slipped on the icy ground. Officers tackled and restrained him, wrestling the weapon away. During interrogation, the truth spilled quickly. He was part of a canine trafficking ring. He had grabbed the 2 pups after the raid, planning to sell them. But when the blizzard hit, he panicked, dumped them on Henry's porch, and intended to return once the storm cleared. The pups' missing tags were found inside his van. Henry stared at the tiny dogs beside him. He hadn't just sheltered them. He had saved their lives. By morning, the storm had passed, and so had the danger. The suspect was taken into custody, and the trafficking ring began to unravel under police investigation. Henry stood on his porch with the 2 pups nestled in his arms, watching the officers load evidence into their vehicles. Despite everything, the pups remained glued to him, tiny bodies trembling only when he stepped too far away. The police chief approached with a gentle smile. "Henry, I don't think I've ever seen pups bond to someone so fast," he said. "You saved them." Plain and simple. Henry scratched behind one pup's ear. "They saved me too," he murmured. The chief nodded. "Until they're old enough for full training, they need a foster home. One where they feel safe." He paused. "If you're willing, we'd like that home to be yours." Henry blinked, emotion swelling in his chest. "You're serious?" "They chose you, Henry. That matters." Weeks passed, then months. The pups grew stronger, playful, loyal, always at Henry's side. They learned commands, protected the yard, and slept curled against the old man's boots every night. One evening at sunset, Henry sat on the porch swing as both pups rested beside him. He looked down, smiling softly. "I thought I rescued you too," he whispered. "But maybe you rescued me."